Airlines Confidential with Scott McCartney is made possible with support from Pratt & Whitney, committed to working smarter, cleaner, and greener today for a more sustainable tomorrow. PrattWhitney.com. Infinity Flight, the leader in Cadet Academy flight training programs. InfinityFlight.com. Ontario International Airport in Southern California. SoCal So Easy. And by Cirium, the world's most trusted source of aviation analytics, Cirium.com. We also welcome your business's support. Contact us at airlinesconfidential.com.
Welcome to Airlines Confidential. I'm Scott McCartney, and I'm smoked, roasted, fried, and stuffed after an indulgent Thanksgiving. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday. I also hope you weren't sitting in a huge traffic jam on Wednesday evening trying to get into Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Charles Duncan, welcome back and happy Thanksgiving. I hope you weren't sitting in that DFW traffic gridlock.
Hey, Scott, happy Thanksgiving. And no, absolutely. I was very fortunate to be nowhere near DFW for the Thanksgiving holiday. But speaking of airports, and this was well timed. It's almost like we had pre-planned it, but we didn't. We're going to be talking to the head of one of the most interesting and competitive airports in the country, Denver International Airport. Phil Washington has been CEO there since 2021. You and I had a great conversation with him several weeks ago, and I think we'll learn a lot about running big transportation systems from Phil. And, he has some really interesting insights into the talent that's needed in the industry at all levels. And I think our listeners will really enjoy that. But obviously, in the week that has passed, Scott, the big story came out Friday afternoon, late on Black Friday, as many people were not thinking about maybe recovering from turkey and getting on holiday shopping and this sort of thing. And this, of course, is related to the Airbus A320 family. Airbus determined that intense solar radiation could corrupt data critical to flight on about 6,000 of its jets in the A320 family worldwide, and that a software fix was needed immediately. This messaging came out from EASA over the holiday weekend, and it came out of an investigation that I'm sure some of our listeners will recall back at the end of October. A JetBlue flight suddenly pitched down and lost altitude. I believe about 15 people on board were injured, and that flight diverted. It was flying from Cancun to Newark, diverted to Tampa. And again, 15 passengers were hospitalized. It was really a dramatic event. So the problem was apparently introduced in a software update. And most of the airplanes can be fixed with a new software update, which takes a couple of hours to complete. Some of those aircraft apparently have to have an older computer replaced to be able to handle solar flares. Obviously, the timing of this fix couldn't have been worse for airlines in the U.S. dealing with a busy holiday travel period. I know my heart sank on Friday when I saw this news, come out. And most airlines, essentially had to get the work done on Friday and Saturday. And with Saturday being a bit of a slower travel day, created maybe a bit of slack, but you also, aircraft technicians, engineers, mechanics, they're on the holiday weekend as well. So it just put, for sure, a whole lot of stress and strain on people. And, there were delays and a few cancellations over the weekend, but it seems like airlines, here in the U.S. and globally just did an amazing job taking planes out of service for a couple of hours and getting those updates installed and checked out overnight. I'll share a couple of data points. That was widespread as the Airbus fleet is. This impacted dozens and dozens of airlines across the globe. American, for example, said 209 of its 480 A320 family aircraft were affected, so almost half of their A320 fleet, and the majority were updated and returned to service on Friday, with the rest returned on Saturday. I did see some press reports that All Nippon in Japan and Jetstar in Australia canceled a few dozen flights each as they weren't able to get the software updated. And probably the most impacted, airline here in North America was JetBlue, where they've reported they're expecting 70 cancellations on the Sunday following Thanksgiving when we're recording this, and 30 of their aircraft have yet to have the software installed as of Sunday. So it was a busy Thanksgiving weekend for those in tech ops, and in particular for those airlines that operate the A320 family. For Thanksgiving overall, I was not traveling, Scott. I was hosting my whole family, here for the holiday. But I must say, in addition to the A320 challenges, Mother Nature didn't cooperate with our annual pilgrimage to Grandma's either. There were severe storms that hit numerous hubs across the country with lots of delays. Going into the holiday, Chicago O'Hare, saw more than half of United's flights were delayed on the day before Thanksgiving, according to FlightAware. And the same for American. It was tough on travelers, tough on airlines. And Scott, it sounds to me like you were stuck in some traffic in DFW. Maybe tell me more about that.
No, fortunately, I wasn't, but I was watching it on TV in horror. It doesn't compare to what's happened at O'Hare. You get hit by storms, both the day going in and the busiest day coming out. Just seems kind of unfair. It's really tough. I have to say, at the same time I was watching the DFW traffic meltdown, also watching the A320 software issue with kind of amazement at the orchestration that the fix took at such a busy time. It looks like kudos to all airline operations folks, mechanics, dispatchers, everyone who had to juggle fleets to get the fixes made so quickly, swapping aircraft, taking aircraft down, taking a delay, but getting it back online in time for next flight or whatever. Seems like this fix on the fly, so to speak, was a thing of beauty because it didn't turn into a massive disruption.
Yep.
Really kind of fascinating to see, how airlines can pull that off so skillfully. What was not pulled off skillfully was DFW Airport. I have to say, I was thinking about my oldest daughter who hates to travel on the day before Thanksgiving. And this year, she was certainly correct about DFW, and she wasn't traveling. I give the airport the Turkey Award of the year. The construction had multiple lanes blocked, restricting flow into the airport from the only two entrances that it has, both the north and the south. People said they sat for an hour or two. Some got out of their cars and walked because they were worried about missing flights. If you know DFW, you know there's no such thing as a short walk. The airport property is larger than the island of Manhattan. And, it could be a couple miles from the backup was past the toll booth and back up to the highway. And the spine road in the middle was complete gridlock. I'd call it a green bean casserole disaster for the brand new DFW CEO, Chris McLaughlin. I know sometimes construction closures during holidays are unavoidable, but this work has been ongoing for a long time, and this was all long planned. To have traffic lanes closed on the main road through the middle of the airport on the busiest travel days seems like really poor planning. Sure, it may cost more to pace a project around peak periods. It may delay a project, but you have to plan it so that you can temporarily reopen all traffic lanes because you're going to need them. That's the business you're in. You plan for and live for the peak periods. And add to that, DFW communications were absent too. There was really no special warning to people. Sure, there were all the, it's going to be busy, arrive 90 minutes before departure, and now give yourself extra time and all that. But nothing to say, hey, wait a minute, there's construction going on. We're going to have lanes closed. And so you better plan accordingly. No push for the mass transit rail that runs to the airport. And the TV helicopter pictures were really sort of horrifying. Just a sea of red taillights. No, my wife looked at it and said, "Why is everything red?" That's the taillights. It looked like the whole place was on fire.
Oh my.
It even caught the news anchors by surprise. They were like, "What is going on out there?" No one's seen anything, really quite like that. Great Lock only lasted a couple hours, the busiest time on Wednesday. But wow, just really poor planning and no real explanation, real time from the airport about what was going on. McLaughlin's in his first year running DFW. He was promoted from within. He had been running airfield operations. Let's hope this is a lesson learned.
Scott, this reminds me as we talked to Phil Washington in a few minutes. We asked him, in our interview about the lack of redundancy for the train service there at the airport, and how that poses a challenge. But as I reflect on this story and what happened at DFW, well, first, Denver, it has double the landmass of DFW, while they're both the size, bigger than Manhattan. It's 34,000 acres versus 17,000 acres. I went and looked it up just for a sense of scale. And yet Denver only has one roadway entry point. And I started thinking about that here over the holiday break. I'm sure Phil and his team are aware, and difficult to create a second roadway, but the importance of this infrastructure and beefing it up and being prepared for those peak holiday periods, I think is critical. And you're wise and right to point this out. So
that's really true about Denver, and it's a smaller road than DFW. I mean, the spine road through DFW is 4 or 5 lanes wide. It was down to 3 lanes. That seemed to be the problem. Even taking out one lane can really be disruptive when you need them all. And I'm sure people in LA would say, "Hey, that's called Tuesday at LAX."
Fair point.
but still, it just didn't have to be, I don't think. One interesting and perhaps encouraging statistic, Charles, I looked up the number of people TSA processed at checkpoints on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving this year. And it was about 2.75 million. The number processed last year on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving was about 2.73 million. So it's up slightly, a tick less than 1%, actually. Now, is that the glass half full or the glass half empty? There were worries that the government shutdown had spooked airline bookings for Thanksgiving. Jeff Freeman of the U.S. Travel Association, who Dave Hilfman mentioned last week, he said just last week at a conference that the shutdown had led to a 10% reduction in bookings. We talked about whether that would rebound quickly after the shutdown ended, and apparently it did. In the end, I think it's a positive that the number is actually higher than last year. 1% growth is not what the industry wants, obviously. Given the circumstances, that probably is a glass that's half full. What do you think?
Yeah, hey Scott, I'll take the win. I'm always an optimist, and so we'll tend to kind of lean in the glass half full direction most times. But I might have shared with you, but at the height of the government shutdown, I was with my parents who live in a retirement community. I was just blown away by how many of their friends and neighbors were asking me about the government shutdown and would it be safe to book holiday travel. And that was the sign to me that this had sort of broken through from typical Airlines Confidential listeners and the issues that we're focused on and into sort of the mass population. And so I was worried that it was going to have, a big negative impact on demand and travel. And I'll take the positive 1% growth and let's take it for a win and move on. But I think both can be true. It had an impact, and yet we're lucky to get out with a minimal amount of growth as we have.
Yeah, and it's kind of a fascinating number, and even though it seems so benign, because this year there has been a lot of capacity reduction. So 1% up from last year. Well, that's a good thing if overall capacity is overall traffic is down for the year, and you also know that it's not spread evenly, right? So Spirit is probably way down, right? Because they've had huge capacity reductions.
For sure.
And so some of those travelers have gone to other airlines. And so it'll be really fascinating when the fourth quarter numbers come out to see who benefited and who lost and all this.
Yeah, well, this fourth quarter is going to be pivotal. I know a lot of airlines have been banking on a strong fourth quarter, and that was, of course, before the government shutdown and the challenges and the weather issues and everything else. All these things come at a cost. But hey, Scott, I thought we spent so much time already now talking about the U.S. side of the industry, but there's some interesting news on the European side. I thought we could take a couple of minutes to focus on, and that's coming out of Portugal. So apparently the bids are in for TAP Air Portugal, and yet another attempt at privatization. I've honestly lost count and lost track of the number of times they've gone through the process. It's really a pretty interesting saga, and ultimately, I think this is going to result in further consolidation in Europe. It seems that there were only three bidders, and probably not a big surprise that it was one bid from each of the big three in Europe. IAG, Lufthansa Group, and Air France-KLM are all vying to acquire TAP Air Portugal. And the government has set for itself a deadline of December 12th, just a couple of weeks away, to assess the bids and make a decision. Now, to recap this, there's some history that we were able to pull from a great newsletter out of London that was done by the consulting group Aviation Strategy. So hat tip to them for providing and sort of straightening out this history. But TAP, which was founded in 1945, was nationalized in 1974. And then in the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, Portugal, as a country, essentially went bankrupt, and the country had to get bailed out by the European Union and the IMF. One of the conditions of that bailout was that the government should sell TAP Air Portugal. And the sole bid in 2012 ended up collapsing. And it wasn't until 3 years later, in 2015, that David Neeleman, then running Azul out of Brazil, successfully bid for a 61% stake in the airline through a consortium that was called Atlantic Gateway. But then at the beginning of 2016, a new government rewrote the agreement and reduced Neeleman's consortium from 61% to 45% ownership, but with 90% economic rights. The airline grew strongly for 4 years. It renewed and expanded its fleet, doubled flights to North America, increased passengers by 50%, and in 2017 even achieved an operating profit. But when the COVID pandemic came around, it hit TAP particularly hard, and TAP was tapped out of money and had to turn to the government for a loan. And the terms forced Neeleman to bow out of the consortium and sell his 22.5% stake back to the government. TAP was bailed out and restructured. And as part of that restructuring, it had to dispose of 10% of its slots in Lisbon. And those slots ultimately went to Ryanair and EasyJet. For the past 3 years, TAP has been profitable, and now a new government wants to sell 44.9% to a strategic partner, and employees would own 5%, and the government would hang on to just a bit more than 50% of the share ownership. TAP is the 12th largest European airline and has 101 airplanes. Portugal has been pretty hot lately as a destination, and Lisbon, though it's heavily slot constrained with only 2 runways that intersect, is well positioned geographically as a connecting hub. And I'll point out that this TAP sale follows just this year earlier. ITA was acquired by Lufthansa Group, the former Alitalia, and SAS was acquired by Air France-KLM, and I believe in both cases minority stakes, but moving towards majority ownership by those groups. And I think this TAP sale is just one further sign of a growing and consolidation of the EU big three, if we can call it that. What do you think, Scott? Any reflections or thoughts on the European experience?
Yeah, no, I think it's I do think it's fascinating. This could tip the scales a little bit one way or the other. You mentioned the Lufthansa acquisition in Italy. this could really make Lufthansa's group much stronger. The IAG thing is interesting, I think, just from a sort of geopolitical view of how does Portugal feel about being connected to a Spanish airline, because IAG has Iberia. And so how do they get along on the peninsula? The thing that most kind of the red flag for me is that the government still wants to maintain more than 50% ownership. And that's not really privatization, but
Right.
The government continually wants the benefit without risk. Now, the government might also well say, "Hey, we keep having to bail you guys out, so maybe we should be the owner of it." Anyway, I think it'll be long term interesting. I do think being part of a larger group will be good for TAP. And I think there's a lot of potential there. I don't know a thing about the geography or the politics in Lisbon, but it would seem like they need another runway badly. They're obviously concerned about competition in slots. Sort of fascinating that had to dispose 10% of the slots in an earlier round of this to Ryanair and EasyJet. Obviously, the government wants low-fare competition in there. So it seems to me, rather than worrying about owning the airline, the government ought to be looking at building another runway.
Interesting. Yeah, no doubt about that. No doubt. I mean, they've even moved into Porto and hubbing Porto, which has more capacity, but clearly the demand is in Lisbon, the capital. So really, interesting to see. And I think there are pros and cons for from a Portuguese perspective with any one of the big three coming in.
Sure.
I would say, TAP is not unlike SAS and Finnair and LOT Air Polish and so these other peripheral members of global alliances where they're really largely frozen out of the joint ventures across the Atlantic. And so, whomever, acquires TAP, presumably they would bring TAP into an immunized JV, which would bring with it additional revenues and traffic and better revenue performance, and I think that would be a big selling point as well. That would play out almost irrespective of which of the players and the Portuguese routes from Brazil to Portugal that TAP operates are a real gold mine that I think hold a lot of appeal to all three of the players. So This will be a fun one to watch, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, no doubt all three of those players will want to have an ability to get a majority control over time. Perhaps they can negotiate that as part of a purchase agreement. Who knows?
Yeah. So one other airport note, by the way, there was news this past week about London's Heathrow. The United Kingdom government endorsed the airport's plan for a third runway. There were competing ideas, but the government's now settled on a specific plan. So that should help move the process along. Doesn't mean dirt's going to start moving anytime soon. Still a long way to go for a third runway for Heathrow, and unclear whether government will ever go ahead with it. But one of the stumbling blocks apparently is coming up with a plan on how to allocate newly created slots. Where should they go? Should they be sold? Should they be awarded? Should be, who gets them? No agreement on that yet. So stay tuned, but maybe a little bit of progress at Heathrow.
Yeah, well, and I'll say this is sort of our infrastructure issue, Scott. When you think about Denver International being the last fully new airport opened in the U.S. a couple of decades ago, but whether it's Heathrow expansion over time, Gatwick is adding a second runway by the end of the decade. Thinking about new terminals and projects in Pittsburgh and San Diego, Kansas City. It's nice to see
Burbank
forward. So I think now then the airline guy maybe flips around and says, yes, but the infrastructure is expensive. And of course there's a balance, but we do need the infrastructure. And as Lisbon points out, another good example, ultimately we need runways and gate capacity to support the growth in the industry.
Yeah.
I was encouraged, heartened by that, knowing that it's still going to take a long, long time for Heathrow to actually see the increased capacity it so badly needs.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, back in the U.S., a bit more political theater from our government over its flight cancellation orders and the shutdown. FAA Administrator Brian Bedford said the agency has sent letters to airlines inquiring whether they complied with orders to cancel flights in the shutdown. Orders that were designed more to cause headlines, and certainly did shake up people at your parents' retirement community.
Indeed.
And everywhere else. So the whole design was to cause headlines and pressure lawmakers into a resolution. We still haven't seen any quote unquote safety quote numbers that supposedly triggered the schedule reduction, right? I think this is probably the last you'll hear of those letters. After all, the FAA knows actually which airline flew what, right? It's they have the data. It's very clear. It cleared each and every one of those flights. To me, the FAA orders were random to begin with. First, it was gradually moving to 10%, then it was capped at 6%, then it was 3% before being lifted. After the shutdown ended, airlines resumed schedules. Cancellations were minimal that first weekend, for example. But the FAA was still saying you have to cancel 3% of your schedule. It made no sense. If a flight can go, let it go. There were delays, but the system worked fine. The FAA still had a 3% cut order in place. It lifted the order with fanfare on Monday, but airlines were already clearly ignoring it. It seems to me like a bit of a childish control issue. None of this happens in a vacuum. The FAA has system-wide conference calls with airlines every 2 hours. The frontline people know what the system can handle, and so why not let them fly? They did let them fly, and now the FAA is saying they moved without saying "Mother, may I?" I just don't get it. So, what do you think, Charles?
Well, hey, Scott, it's better for people who know more about DC and politics to weigh in on something like this. But honestly, none of the shutdown and this reduction in flights made sense to me. And I'm just thankful that the shutdown is now over. We can move on with the rest of our lives, so to speak. But the damage was done, and again, I can't make sense out of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of thanks, Scott, we want to thank Pratt & Whitney for its longtime sponsorship of Airlines Confidential. At Pratt & Whitney, the pursuit of sustainable aviation is foundational. For decades, Pratt & Whitney has been at the forefront of revolutionary advancements in aircraft propulsion technology. And by working smarter, cleaner, and greener today, they are committed to supporting the aviation industry in its goal of reaching net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Learn more about Pratt & Whitney's smarter technology, cleaner fuel, and greener business at prattwhitney.com. In addition, thanks to Infinity Flight Academy, the leader in cadet academy training programs. Whether you're looking to build a custom pipeline or strengthen your existing cadet program, Infinity Flight Academy delivers consistent, airline-ready results. And for those of you listening who've always dreamed of flying or know someone who has, Infinity Flight has trained thousands of students, many now flying for major airlines around the world. Learn more at infinityflight.com. Infinity Flight Academy, where future airline pilots take off.
And I'm thankful this Thanksgiving for support from Cerium. Cerium offers the most accurate and precise data and analytics to enable airlines to optimize planning, operations, and passenger services. The right intelligence drives operational efficiencies, enables you to predict market shifts, and helps airlines respond quickly to maximize revenue, manage costs, and seize commercial opportunity. And no doubt, managed software fixes in Airbus A320 jets as well. Visit Cerium.com for more. And thanks to Ontario International Airport for its support. Ontario International Airport is celebrating a decade of local control. Thanks to public support, the local community reclaimed ONT, revived it as a vital gateway in Southern California, and ensured the airport is ready to soar even higher in years to come. Visit flyontario.com/10 to learn the story and find out how you can join the year-long celebration of how a decade of local control has turned Ontario into one of California's fastest growing and most economical airports. Congratulations, too, are in order for ONT. Southwest Airlines just announced new daily flights in June next year to Honolulu from Ontario and also from Burbank. Some interesting pictures on social media of the construction of the Burbank airport terminal that's coming along rather quickly, it seems. Alaska already serves that route from ONT, so the number of seats to Honolulu will double for that airport. So very interesting. All right, let's get to our interview with Phil Washington. Philip A. Washington is the CEO of Denver International Airport, the sixth busiest by passengers and one of the most competitive and interesting airports in the world. DEN is undergoing a $10 billion capital improvement program and working toward capacity for 100 million passengers per year. Prior to Washington's arrival at Denver in 2021, he was the CEO of the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority for 6 years. His move back to Denver was a homecoming of sorts because Phil went to LA from overseeing the Denver Regional Transportation District. Originally from the south side of Chicago, Phil is a 24-year veteran of the U.S. Army. He holds a bachelor's degree in business from Columbia College, a master's degree in management from Webster University, and is a graduate of the Harvard University Kennedy School for Senior Executives in State and Local Government. Welcome to Airlines Confidential, Phil. It is great to have you join us.
Well, it's great to be here. I appreciate you having us on and allowing us to tell part of our story.
Well, we always start with what we affectionately call the Ben Baldanza question, because Ben, who co-created this podcast, taught me that this was a great way to start interviews, and he always wanted to know, how'd you get into this crazy business of air travel?
I've been in transportation since I retired from the United States Army 25 years ago, believe it or not. And though I started with ground transportation or transit, I always thought that leadership is transferable to any mode, in this case of transportation. And so when I was asked, would I be interested in taking over Denver International Airport, I saw it as another mode of transportation, but I thought about how leadership is transferable. And I said yes. And I'm happy that I did say yes.
And the industry is better off for having your involvement, Phil. And again, welcome to the podcast. Listen, I think most of our listeners are aware that Denver has seen remarkable growth, especially coming out of the COVID period. And this is a little bit dated now, but looking at the 2024 numbers, Den is number 3 in the U.S. and number 6 globally with 2024 82 million passengers. So you're not that far off that 100 million passenger goal. And I was surprised that you're just a hair behind London Heathrow, for our international listeners. And I wouldn't be surprised if you pass Heathrow in 2025. So with that sort of context and setup, it's surprising. It's impressive. How are you and your team managing that level of growth? I believe you are the fastest growing airport, certainly in the country, if not the world, among the airports of scale. So how are you guys dealing with it?
Well, that's a great question, Charles. When I arrived here, I saw that a couple of things were happening. We are an airport that is designed for 50 million annual passengers.
Wow.
And when I saw that or heard that, I immediately thought, you know what, we've got projections for 100 million at that time. And we needed to start building to accommodate those higher numbers. And so we put together something called Vision 100. Vision 100 is our strategic plan, 4 pillars to that strategic plan or Vision 100. And one of the pillars is to begin to build infrastructure to accommodate those higher numbers. And we got right to it. Some of that had already started, but it was very, very important for us to do a number of things. One was to, of course, build to accommodate those higher numbers, but the other was to make sure we prepared our people for those higher numbers, professionally, technically, all of those things, make sure we prepared them. And at the same time, develop a very, very good comprehensive asset management system, because we can talk about building new infrastructure, but we've got to take care of the infrastructure that we already have. And so asset management becomes very, very important. And so we began to take on that culture of making sure we could accommodate those higher numbers. And I credit the team for jumping on, sort of the culture wagon. And we began to build. All of the projects since I have been here have been finished on time, on budget. And that is the new West Security and East Security areas. And we're very, very proud of that. We now have forecast for 2045 where we will have 120 million annual passengers. And we've already started the early work to accommodate that 120 plus number.
One of those projects is the Great Hall project, right? And you mentioned the East and West Security. I think anybody who's been through the airport has seen all the work going on. Tell us about the Great Hall project and what it means for passengers at Denver.
Well, the Great Hall project is the terminal, of course, and we're one of those airports that have one terminal. There's other airports that have, LAX has 7 terminals and Chicago has several terminals. We have one terminal, and that's the Great Hall. And so the biggest and most important project for this airport is completing that Great Hall. So we went at this project in 3 phases. The first phase is the middle of the terminal. And so if you think about the middle of the terminal, we have our 2 biggest airlines there, United and Southwest. So finishing that, which included bringing out the floor plate about 40 feet and creating more space. We finished that ahead of schedule and under budget. The next big piece was, of course, the security checkpoints, and I mentioned that. So the second phase has gone very, very well. We are in the completion phase right now, which is the south end of the Great Hall near the hotel. We will finish that on time and on budget as well. But we fully recognize that the Great Hall is what people see first, and that becomes very, very important for us. So I'm happy to say that it's going very, very well. You mentioned, I think, Charles, that we are growing to a point that we are, closing in on London and probably will overtake them. With that growth, we're also in a construction period. And I think we're the only airport that despite the construction, significant construction, in the one terminal that we have, we're still seeing growth. And so I don't think there's another airport in the world that is both in full construction and at the same time seeing the level of growth over the last 3 years.
That's interesting. Yeah,
absolutely. No, you're right. I think about JFK, and they've got a lot of construction in some ways, and it's more negatively impacting the customer experience. Some of that, the train and so on, versus Denver. But really, as you're growing, you're right. It's impressive. Hey, one thing I've been meaning to ask you, and this is more just a personal, what came out of personal experience. I'm in and out of Denver quite a bit. And I've seen a couple of times in the last year the train, the below ground train, be out of service. And speaking of the one check-in, TSA area in the Great Hall, it gets backed up, and there's just no way to physically get from the Great Hall out to certainly the B and C concourses. And I think even with A, it can be a challenge. I've been there stuck, along with thousands of other people, and just thought to myself, why didn't the original designers build some redundancy in? It seems like an obvious thing. Atlanta has a similar design and has it. I realize that was well before your time, Phil, but I'm just sort of curious. Do you guys see it the same way? And is there anything you can do? I bet it's going to be expensive to sort of fix that and create a backup.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel the same way. The lack of redundancy. I mean, this is a must-ride train, out to the concourses. And even though, we are under a new contract with Alstom, the train operator, and in their contract, this latest contract last year, we put in a provision that the train must be up and running, I think 99.6% of the time or something. When it goes down, it's pure chaos. I mean, the airport literally stops, really. And so 2 years ago, I put out a request for information to the private sector to provide us ideas around redundancy for the train. And we received a lot of great ideas. And the most prominent idea is a pedestrian bridges from A to B, B to C. Now, these are not cheap, but they provide us not just redundancy, because that's just one thing, but it enhances the customer experience. If you're walking across the bridge, the vistas, the mountains, it doubles the concession space. We have 250,000 square feet of concession space now. Bridges and the bases of those bridges on either end of the span that would be multi-storied provide us another 250,000 square feet. And then the sustainability piece and the financial stability of the airport itself with the revenues generated from additional concessions. One of the things that we don't often talk about, we think about it, but people don't ask me too much about it, is that with those increased numbers, there is a need for more concessions. We are actually under concessioned.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
the bridges, which I'm a big fan of, is something that we are exploring. Again, they're not cheap, but I think that that would solve the original sin.
Yeah. Right. Hey, but Phil, I love that idea. And I'll tell you, I mean, even now, I will often go out of my way and take the bridge from the Great Hall over to the A concourse just because it's a pleasant experience. And so to have that hopscotch in the backup, yeah, I love that. And the concessions opportunity too is a great one. So
Yeah.
I will, I'm sure that's, beyond expensive and it will take a long time, but you certainly got 2 votes, I'd say, here in favor of that. Yours.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're going to sit on an airplane for 6 or 14 hours or whatever it's going to be, sometimes you want to walk. And so, for a lot of people, as you say, the vistas and all, there's a bridge over taxiway at the new LaGuardia terminal. And it's great. You see the city, you see airplanes underneath you. It's terrific.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Awesome.
I've begun to start to talk about that idea as a bridge over troubled water. So
over troubled prairie. All right. Well, Phil, Charles and I, along with Oscar Munoz, are all proud to be teaching in the upcoming Colorado University Denver EMBA program, Executive MBA program. And the airport is hosting and sponsoring this first of a kind program, first executive MBA for aviation in the world. How did you get the idea to participate in such a meaningful way in an academic program like this? And I'm curious what your vision for, what do you like about the program? What do you hope that it will achieve?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott. I have always been a huge supporter and proponent of education, career pathways. In fact, 3.5 years ago, we started something called our Center of Excellence here that includes career pathways. So we have actually been in 200 schools, grammar schools here. One of the things that strikes me is, there's a lot of young people that live in the shadow of this airport that will never get on an airplane. And they see the airport, but they don't know quite how to navigate it for a job or a career. And so even before this, I was involved with starting a transportation oriented school in Los Angeles. It's called the Seed School in Los Angeles, a high school, grades 9 to 12, a boarding school concept where the kids stay Monday through Friday, transportation focused. And so this program is in line, at least with my thinking, around career pathways. And we're talking about young people, kids in grammar school, all the way through to senior leadership. So it's a cradle to grave approach, the grave, of course, being the CEO position. This program, in my mind, fits right into that pathway of a young adult or, a middle-aged adult, for that matter, who wants to earn an MBA in the aviation field. And so when I heard about it, it was a no-brainer for me. I think it's going to be unique in ways that we don't even imagine. And I think people from all over the world will, again, come to see Denver in this Rocky Mountain region as the Silicon Valley of aviation talent.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, love that.
You said it was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer for me and Scott to sign up. So we're both teaching respective courses, and we're so grateful to you for your leadership and in providing the location and the sponsorship and so forth. It's exciting. When we start in January, I think. We're having a faculty meeting in December, and hopefully we'll get a chance to meet us in person and the other faculty through that. And I can tell you, I've had students, potential students from around the world, reach out about the program. So I think it will certainly have a global impact from what I see. So.
Yeah, and along with your vision, I really think there's a huge need for this because I think better educated leaders will provide more effective management, more creative management, and this is exactly what the industry needs. So kudos to Denver
kudos
and to
you for the vision,
for helping get this off the ground.
So I'll jump in because I've got one other question, Scott. I've been kind of keen to ask here. That this ties into the growth question earlier, Phil. But most cities, most hub airports are pretty happy. I'd say generally most stays happy to have one airline hub customer. Think about cities like Charlotte or Dallas or Houston or Salt Lake near you. It occurs to me, there are a few airports that have two major carrier presences, but nobody in the country has three duking it out in the way that you do. I believe United's largest operation in the country, biggest hub, is Den. Southwest, similarly, its largest operation is also Den. And of course, you've got the hometown headquarters for Frontier, and their largest presence is there as well. How do you manage those three competitors? And you got to be neutral. You can't have your favorites, but you want them all to grow and prosper. How do you manage that level of complexity?
Well, thank you for the question. We manage them very carefully. But I love our competitive mix, right?
Yeah.
I love
Right.
our competitive mix. We want all three of them, as you say, to grow, and the other ones that are here to grow.
Sure. Yep.
With that competitive mix, we keep fares down as well. And that's a big, big thing, right?
Yeah.
Keeping fares low. If one airline drops a route, another one of those could pick that route up. And that becomes very, very important. So our competitive mix is wonderful, I think. And we meet with all three, along with the others, on a regular basis. I mentioned earlier, I was just in Dallas talking to one of them, the leadership. And so this is about relationships, I believe, and making sure we understand the objectives of the airlines too. And that is increasing our non-aeronautical revenue. That is, we created a metric in our performance measures to really manage that increasing non-aeronautical revenue, because what that results in is keeping their costs low in terms of the CPE, the cost per employment, and all those things. And the residual effect is if their costs are kept low, they can bring in more flights as well. And so we love that mix. We manage it well. We meet with all of the airlines as a group once a month. And then we take trips to the headquarters of our top three. And I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to go to them and understand what is important for them and hear their feedback on what we're doing. So it's working well for us.
That's interesting, and I'll tell you, I bet many of your colleagues, CEOs at other major airports, don't take that effort and make the trip and so on. So good for you, and it's more effort times three versus one.
Yeah.
Or sort of 2.5, since one of them's just down the street.
Fair enough.
Right.
Right. So one of the issues that's really interested me of late is the kind of the tension between airlines and airports on costs. So your cost per enplaned passenger this year is just under 16, and that's lower than many big hubs. And we've seen, even LaGuardia, where years of construction need was pushed off and finally happened, and with enormous price tag. And airlines end up having to pay for that, right? So it's $50 for enplaned passenger or $100 for enplaned passenger, and it's hard at those levels to offer any kind of cheap ticket, right? If so much is going to the airport. So kudos to you guys at 16, a little under 16, but that's up nearly 50% from just 3 years ago. So a big issue, we talked about this before, had some airline folks talk about it, airport folks talk about it. I'm curious from your perspective, do you see this as a big issue, or are you kind of, you're going to be fine where you are? And I'm curious what Denver could do about it.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Scott. It's a very, very important issue. The variability of cost per employment, though, is there. I mean, you've got some airports where airlines take on more of the operational piece, janitorial and all of that. And if you have that, then your cost per employment will be lower if the airlines are taking that on. Here we do that. We do, things like janitorial. We do various things that in other airports, airlines may take that on. It's a very, very important issue. Our CPE at about $16 or so, we work with the airlines. And so the projects that we have, especially on the air side, are all agreed upon from the airlines as important, so they know those costs are coming to them. So they have agreed to the importance of those projects, and so they know very well and have agreed to what we're doing. I think the other thing too, when I arrived here, and this is closely related to the CPE, the Capital Improvement Program, or the CIP. There's so many acronyms in aviation.
There
It's
are
more
too many.
it's
Spell
more
them out.
Yeah, it's more in aviation than it is in the U.S. military. It's crazy.
Hard to
But
believe, but
but our capital improvement program, it was a 5-year program. I changed that to a 12-year program. So with flexibility to move projects around based on regulatory things or urgency for projects and all of that. And so we have been working in lockstep with the airlines on the capital improvement program that really leads to the cost per enplanement number. And so even though it may be a little bit higher, the airlines are fully aware of it. And in that capital improvement program over the next 10 years or so, we've got a number of projects in there that will probably increase that CPE a little bit more, but the airlines know that is coming, and they have agreed to the priority of the projects that we have planned. So we will do our best to keep that down through increasing non-aeronautical revenue. But I feel good about kind of where we are right now as it relates to where we are in the pack, if you will.
Yep. I see. Yeah. There's competition, and certainly, with so much of your passenger base being connecting traffic, the airlines, if the cost gets too high, they can divert it somewhere else, so it's good for you to be focused on that CPE, the cost per enplanement. Phil, you were mentioning earlier, your goal or planning horizon around 125 million passengers from your, 82 level, mid 80 million now. And I'm awestruck. I mean, I'm of a certain age. I remember when Stapleton closed and the new den opened, and it was a marvel in terms of the amount of land. It was larger, the land area was larger than Manhattan, if I recall. And I also saw, I think, my first 777 in Denver, and it was in awe of those engines, back in the mid 90s, kind of around the same time. It's hard to believe, but I mean, in 2045, if you think kind of 20 years out, this airport's going to be 50 years old. So it's, in some ways, 20 years is nothing. It's the blink of an eye when you're thinking about 12-year capital planning horizons and those sort of things. What does your mind's eye sort of envision your team as you're forecasting and thinking out maybe to that 50-year anniversary date? Will it be continued sustained growth, or and maybe I'll frame it too. We had one of our co-hosts is Christina Casotas from Pittsburgh, and she talked a few weeks ago about losing the U.S. Air Hub and having to redo their whole terminal because they lost a hub presence and kind of the nature and structure of the airport change. Do you worry about that, or how do you build your infrastructure so that it can sort of be future proofed, if you will? How do you think about those issues and balance them out?
Thank you for that, Charles. We've been thinking a lot about this, right? I mentioned Vision 100, which is getting us to 100 million annual passengers. But Operation 2045 has become very, very important for us. And, I threw that name Operation in there because I'm an Army guy, you know what I mean? But Operation 2045, where I see us and what I see the vision for the next 20 years is an airport with 120 plus million annual passengers. I see us with additional concourses. We have A, B, and C. We do not want to build a concourse D or E because it's too much on the train. So we we're planning to expand the terminal, the Great Hall, to the north with a facility, a processing facility, where we can have walkable concourses from that facility with 25 gates each. And so in 20 years, I see that facility being built, which we've already started the early planning for that facility that will have additional security lanes, additional airline counters, and then we will begin to build the concourses off the north end of the Great Hall. So I see two new concourses coming off there that are walkable, no impacts for the train. I see sustainable aviation fuel here. I see us being energy independent as well. We want to be our own power company with the potential for alternative energy options that include small modular reactors.
Wow.
I see I see us accommodating air taxis and advanced air mobility. We are already have had meetings with various advanced air mobility companies already. I see the Rocky Mountain region through our career pathway effort that I mentioned earlier. I see us being, again, having the most skilled aviation talent in the world here in the Rocky Mountain region. And so all of those things we can do. That is what I see in the next 20 years. I do see growth continuing. I think that with the rise of the middle class, both in Asia and on the continent of Africa, we are going to see more people traveling by air. I think that with the advancement of technology and aviation, we will reduce travel time. That is going to allow more international travel. So I see the growth continuing. There are some headwinds that are out there, namely air traffic control situation, the uncertainty around federal funding. All of those things are headwinds, but people want to travel. One last thing, I was in Istanbul earlier this year, and we were talking to, I think it was the chamber that was there, for the city of Istanbul, the tourism folks. And one gentleman got up and he said, people here, they do not aspire to have a home or like Americans do, right? Like the picket fence and all of that. It's too unattainable for them in terms of how expensive it is. And so they prefer to live in the now, which means travel for them. They want to travel. They're not aspiring, and that's not everybody, but he was making this point that they're not aspiring as we would do to have the house maybe in the suburbs or whatever, and 2.5 kids and a dog or whatever. They're more immediate. They want to enjoy life, and enjoy life means travel. So I think that will occur.
Yeah. Well, and Phil, I believe Turkish Airlines started service earlier this year, linking Istanbul and Denver. So congratulations on that. And I mean, again, as you say, it's not just your big three. You've had lots of successes from other carriers too, and love the vision. I mean, you are very visionary in terms of that growth, and I'm trying to envision this Great Hall concourses. I'll have to jump on your website and take a look at I'm sure you got some drawings or whatnot for that, but that's sounds very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, no, I love the vision, and I love the incorporation of air taxis or new modes of transportation, or whatever's coming. I was going to add, I mean, I'm curious, what's it like for you now dealing with airplanes instead of buses and trains? Are there similarities? Are there differences? And I also want to ask before we go, I'm curious what you see as the biggest challenges for U.S. airports in general. We've talked a lot about the vision for Denver, but what's the biggest issue for U.S. airports? So anything in common with buses and trains?
Yes, I'll start with that one.
Yeah.
The commonality are the people, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, just a quick story. I always, when I was retiring from the military, I worried if my skills were transferable from the military
Mm.
to civilian life or whatever. And I think every person that's in the military for that length of time, they are concerned whether they have transferable skills. Um, but it dawned on me that the transferable thing is leadership, and the common piece of all that are people. And so from transit to aviation, you know what? I'm still dealing with people,
Yeah.
and the need to motivate people, to inspire people, to lead people. I think spans across not just transportation, but it spans every sector. And What I love about transportation infrastructure, or just infrastructure in general, is that it touches everyone. It touches society, right? I mean, I cannot think of any other sector that touches more people than infrastructure.
Mm.
And I'm talking sidewalks, roads, transit, aviation, maybe healthcare is a close one,
Hmm. Sure.
but it's pretty incredible. In
Yeah.
terms of in terms of challenges for just airports in general, I think there's a number of positive things out there that we can look to. One is, and I was talking about this about Istanbul, but the segment of the population that has a high propensity to fly. And so I think that's a positive. I think declining fuel prices is a good thing in terms of positive. So I think we're going to see more people. I think the unemployment rate is a moderate unemployment rate out there, and so people, I think, will travel. I think there is the hybrid work schedule arrangement. I think will impact people flying. You know, if they can work hybrid and they don't have, now I know that's changing now, but if they work 3 or 4 days a week in the office and they have Friday, to work from home, they'll probably be on an airplane for the long weekend. I don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know where they are. I think business travel, the gradual return or revival in business travel, I think we will see that. And I think also in terms of our capital projects out there for airports, the shortened federal environmental approval process for projects will help us. And so those are positive things. I think there's some negatives as well. And I mentioned the uncertain federal funding. So that is a big thing. I think some of the geopolitical and trade tensions that are out there are going to impact travel. We're seeing that. I think every airport in the lower 48 is seeing that, at least from Canada. I know we're seeing that.
Right.
And then I mentioned the air traffic control piece. I mean, I think there's an existential threat for aviation, and that is the lack of a qualified workforce.
Mm.
And that will be our biggest challenge in
Yeah.
the aviation space. And I know there's some things happening right now, but we've got to somehow fix that. We have to widen the pool of people, and we got to get them through the controller school quicker. And we also have to lessen the degree of subjectivity of those folks that are in the controller schools to make sure that they successfully graduate from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Big challenges. That's a great point. Great point about the skilled workforce that we need. All right, Phil, this has been fabulous. Can't thank you enough. I think we've all learned from you. I know listeners have as well, and we really appreciate your time and look forward to staying in touch. I think this has been really a great session for Airlines Confidential. So I hope we can do it again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Phil.
All right.
And we will be right back with more on Airlines Confidential.
Promotional support provided by the ultimate AvGeek website, thearchive.net. A vast collection of airline memorabilia, timetables, route maps, rare cabin and airport photos, special flights, and more. All at thearchive.net, the hub of air transport history.
Thanks again to Phil. Okay, Scott, several notes in the mailbag this week. First, Daniel from Vancouver wants to ask about that very construction at DFW you were complaining about, Scott. Daniel writes, and I quote, DFW is undergoing a $9 billion renovation in hopes of servicing 100 million passengers a year in 2030. That's about a 15% increase in capacity. Where do you see that demand coming from? Many more flights from American, Southwest bulking up there, Delta? Good question, Daniel. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, it's a really good question. From all appearances, it looks like the airport is catering to American expansion. The new terminal under construction, Terminal F, will be for American. Don't even think about it, Southwest, and then Southwest did, but because there will be no check-in area at Terminal F. You'll have to check in at an expanded area of Terminal E on the other side of that very clogged spine highway I was talking about. Take the SkyTrain train to F. So they made the new terminal very unfriendly for a new entrant, such as Southwest. Southwest said it does plan to serve DFW. CEO Bob Jordan said recently, it's not a question of if, but when. Southwest, as listeners will recall or know well, Southwest is maxed out at Dallas Love Field, the closer in airport. And a fight to get the city of Dallas to build more gates and risk neighborhood opposition seems unlikely right now. They're out from under the restrictions of the Wright Amendment and the follow-on agreements. So it could happen, but I just don't think the city is going to have the interest or desire to expand Love Field. So I think Southwest has its eye on McKinney Airport to the north of Dallas. McKinney, it's a one runway landing strip where I did a whole lot of my flight training. But now McKinney's building a commercial airline terminal. It's a busy private jet airport. It is located in sort of surrounded by a lot of the growth. So I think McKinney has a lot of potential, not just for Southwest, but for other carriers too. I think Southwest also has its eye on DFW for international service. It can't offer international flights out of Dallas Love Field. That's a real real restriction to not be able to compete on international routes from Dallas, which is Southwest's home. The design of the new terminal makes it far more likely that Southwest will set up shop in Terminal E, which is where all the cats and dogs are right now, and they can offer international flights out of that facility. Can American grow 15% at DFW? Absolutely. American has made clear that its future is centered very much on DFW and Charlotte. DFW is really crucial to Americans' growth. So I think that's what it'll be.
Yeah, Scott, I agree with your assessment. I mean, American clearly has room and aspirations to grow its DFW operation, and that is, their most important long-term priority. From the Southwest point of view, I might take a slightly different perspective. I mean, look, I'm reminded 20 years ago, there was a huge battle in Houston along similar lines, although by no means is the Houston airport situation as fraught as Dallas is. But Hobby Airport lobbied for Southwest to get international service, and it was fought, tooth and nail by the team at Continental and folks who were in favor of IAH, the international airport in Houston. ultimately, Hobby got international service, and the two airports coexist, I think, pretty successfully today. And look, when you split operations in a busy metro area, and I'm thinking about Hobby and IAH in Houston, or think of Midway and O'Hare in Chicago, it's very difficult to operate and make that work. And, the international flights work when you have connecting customers coming in on domestic flights, and just split operations are, in my mind, are almost just doomed to fail commercially because they just don't work or make good sense. So if I were Bob Jordan, and not that he's calling me asking for advice, but I would be pushing really hard to expand Love Field, to get a Customs and Border Patrol, an FIS facility put into Love Field. I'd be fighting to get a few more gates, and make that my, as it is today, just expand my centerpiece in Dallas, because I just don't think operating from DFW is going to work, much as I don't think their historical presence. They've been in and out of IAH several times over the years, and I don't think the O'Hare flights are performing all that well relative to what I'll call their hub presence at Midway. So it's just tough to do, tough to make.
Right. And Southwest tried Intercontinental in Houston too,
two
right?
or three times over the years, multiple times. They've entered and exited, and it's just hard. And I think we may see the same thing happen at O'Hare.
So points well taken. I think you're right. It's a tough problem. It's probably even a little tougher because DFW and Love Field are even closer together than the Houston airports or the Chicago airports. Yeah. And so, I think if they were given a choice, Southwest clearly would much rather expand Love Field. With 19 gates there that are already maxed out, there's, if you put international flights in there, you got to cut domestic flights unless you're going to expand the number of gates. So it's a real problem. I thought for a long time that Southwest was making noise about McKinney and DFW and other options to pressure Dallas into saying, okay, yeah, we will expand. But now it seems like there's just no, and the city of Dallas has its own political issues. There'll be a new mayor next year. Maybe, things will change with that. But the neighborhoods around Love Field, I think, are pretty united in opposition to expansion. And it would be tough to overcome. All right, Charles, here's one for you, also very much Dallas-centered. Eugene W. from Las Vegas suggests a merger of American and Southwest. Well, that would take care of all of our airport problems. Eugene says, based on UAL CEO Scott Kirby, only 2 luxury airlines will be left. My bet is that Southwest Airlines and American Airlines would make for a great marriage. Southwest doesn't have a major international presence. They both headquarter in Dallas. They can divest slots to help DOJ approval. To minimize tax exposure and debt, they can exchange shares with some cash infusion. It will make Scott Kirby eat his words. Southwest and American Airlines need each other, especially now that Southwest looks more like just another airline. What do you think, Charles? Crazy idea or not?
Scott, I think Eugene's idea is pretty crazy. To be clear, I don't think it's going to ever happen. And I can think of 3 reasons why. But, first, before I even jump into it, I really enjoyed your interview with Scott Kirby a couple of weeks ago now. And if folks haven't listened to that, I would highly encourage it. Just go back and listen. And as you said in the interview, he's very much sort of taken on the role almost of Bob Crandall from the 1980s and sort of, speaking on behalf, for his company in the industry. And it just was a really interesting insight into the way Scott sees the world. So I understand why Eugene is posing the question. And look, I think the first reason I think this is crazy and won't happen is mergers and the integration are tough. And in this particular case, the companies are, in spite of being both headquartered in Dallas, they are very, very different in almost every way. And, having lived through the Continental and United merger, as some of my other fellow co-hosts, have as well. I mean, that was a hard one to pull off, just because the difference in particularly in culture, but also just so many intangible sort of soft areas. This one would be even that much more challenging. So that'd be the first reason. DOJ and even DOT approval, I think, would be very, very difficult to win here, because don't forget, these are each of these airlines are part of the big four, so each has greater than a 20% market share in the country, and you would create a massive airline. And I think even the current DOJ, would have serious trouble challenge approving something like this. Just given the large size and scale of both American and Southwest, and I think by some counts, they're probably number one and number two by domestic passenger count. So, allowing those two to merge would be a real challenge. And the third point is that, while both of these airlines are underperforming financially, neither one is failing or flailing around. They just both need to do better in that sense. Right. So neither player, I don't think is anywhere near desperate enough to be drawn to a merger like this. I mean, I think that would be more of a desperation play for a carrier that was about to file for bankruptcy or failing, and clearly neither one is anywhere near that state. So I don't see this happening. In certainly my professional lifetime, I'll frame it that way. It just doesn't get.
I didn't think we'd see Southwest charge baggage fees in my professional lifetime. Now look.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
No, I agree with you. I mean, there would be some interesting. I think about. You just look around the Southwest, all the regional jets that are flying into American's hub, and hey, if those were replaced with 737s because you were putting all the Lubbock traffic together and all that, but I think the antitrust issues would be enormous. I mean, by 2024 numbers, they're the number 2 and the number 4 airline, and as you said, you put them together, and all of a sudden, one guy's got 40% of the market, and that's just not sustainable. And then you sort of look at particular markets. I mean, just look at Dallas, where Americans got 75% of DFW, and the other airport, Southwest has 95% or something. So you put it together, and it's crushing for any competition in a lot of areas. And yes, despite the policy changes at Southwest, it still has Southwest culture, and very different from American culture, and I think meshing those two together would be, it would have been fun back in the day of Herb Kelleher and Bob Crandall to see the two of them trying to work together. Because they legendarily, I mean, it was all in good fun. I think they respected the heck out of each other. Absolutely. and loved to joke around. Herb painted his planes for 3 of his planes for SeaWorld.
I was just thinking of the same story.
Shamu, the killer whale, and Bob Crandall had a bathtub filled with chocolate pudding and delivered it to Herb as here's your whale shit. And there is if you look online, I'm sure you could find it. There is a hysterical video of Bob Crandall in a tuxedo with candelabra on the piano, sort of singing a love song to Herb, and it's just hysterical. But anyway, I can't imagine those two working together, but it would have been great theater. All in all. An interesting idea, fun to laugh about, but American is going to have to compete with United in other ways, I think.
Agreed. Well, and Eugene, thanks for the letter. We appreciate that, and Scott, we've got one final comment this week from Dave in Chicago. And Dave writes, and I quote, "It is beyond myopic of your guest host, Dave Hilfman, to discuss travel to the USA without discussing the elephant in the room. The current political environment in the U.S. is so toxic that visitors from other countries cannot guarantee their own safety, with ICE running around cities, rounding up people with no recourse. Beyond that, the administration is not making any friends globally. Why would a Canadian choose to visit the U.S. given how their country is treated by the White House? In order to be welcoming to the world, the government needs to value the people of the world and show respect to their countries of origin. You get more flies with honey. Not that I would consider citizens of countries around the world to be flies, just couldn't think of a better analogy," end quote.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this got, we had another letter. I had cited the 8% decline in inbound travel, I think it was for September, as a concerning number. And we had another letter listener write in and say that 8% decline is probably skewed by roughly 30% decline from Canadian travelers. So let me respond for Dave. We've discussed the impact of CBP harassment on inbound foreign visitors and the effect of tariffs and deportations and other government policies before on this podcast, with some specific examples of travelers detained or not allowed to enter the country. Talked about how tariffs have discouraged business travel. We've talked about how meetings and conferences have gone elsewhere. I don't think we've shied away from that at all. Dave was specifically talking about a bill before Congress that was just introduced the week before called the Visit USA Act. He considers it crucial funding to promote the USA abroad. I get Dave from Chicago's point, and he's certainly correct that the treatment of foreigners in the U.S. and the anger around the world at tariffs and immigration policy certainly is hurting inbound tourism. That was the point I was making about the 8% decline in visitors that Dave from San Diego, Dave Hilfman, was responding to. Selling the U.S. abroad is no doubt a tougher sale these days, but many in the business believe the U.S. should be out there selling and not just scrap promotional funding and put up a not welcome sign. Maybe that's what Congress will try to do. Maybe that's what this administration wants, the not welcome sign. But that only hurts airlines, also hotels, restaurants, retail stores, Broadway theaters, Disneyland, Las Vegas casinos, you name it. My own feeling is that we can't avoid politics on the podcast when it affects air travel, as it does in many ways, but we also don't need to repeat what listeners already know. Dave from Chicago makes a good point. So maybe we do need to bring up that elephant in the room more often. In other words, point well taken, Dave.
Yeah, Scott, I'll tell you, as someone who's lived and worked outside the U.S. for more than 20 years, hard to believe, and I've spent many of those years selling the U.S., working for U.S. airlines, in foreign countries. I couldn't agree with Dave from Chicago more, and I know that Dave Hilfman would agree as well. I mean, I worked for Dave and been together with him for many of those 20 years. This just does not help, our industry at all to be antagonizing foreign countries, foreign visitors, and all that's going on in the world. So anyway, thanks to Dave for reaching out and giving us at least a chance to make that point, because it is one I think all of us in the podcast agree with and feel pretty strongly about.
Yeah, no, and this is a serious issue for the economy, not just for the airline industry, but for the U.S.
It has broader implications, for sure. Well, Scott, I believe that is all we have for another edition of Airlines Confidential. Thanks so much to Phil Washington for a great discussion, and have a great week, everyone.
And thanks so much to you, Charles Duncan. Always fun and interesting show with you. I'll be back next week with Doug Parker, and a really unique and exciting idea for a show that Doug had, which I think listeners will really enjoy. We'll see how it goes. Thanks so much for listening. So long, everybody.
This podcast is produced by Mass Media. Info@massmedia.net.